Hello, everybody. Welcome to our final studio album, Rush Deep Dive. Of course, we were talking about the debut album, self-titled Rush. So,
available in red or pink.
Yes, available in red and pink. We will get to that momentarily. So, the debut album was recorded in 1973, originally at Toronto's Eastern Sound on an outdated 8-track recorder. The band was not happy with this, so they ended up switching to Toronto Sound Studios. And they originally were going to, well, our research tells us that David Stock was actually going to be the original producer of this record. Research also tells us that the band really wasn't fond of his work on some of the original singles that they had put out before this record came out. So they were going to, and eventually did, produce this record by themselves. And on the back of, let's see, this one here, the executive producer is credited to a Robin McBride. Now, this record then went on to be remixed by none other than Terry Brown. And Ray Daniels is my name and rock and roll is my name, agreed to fund that. So this record then was put out, of course, in 1974, and the lineup consists of Geddy Lee, Alex Lifeson, and none other than John Rutsey, who played only on this record. And I figured we should just take a brief moment to appreciate his contributions to the band. And quite frankly, being the first drummer for Rush, the original drummer, and I mean, if anyone wants to say anything about him, please do. But I mean, my opinion on him is he was a really solid rock and roll drummer. Nobody's Neil Peart, so trying to compare him to Neil Peart is out of the question. But just a solid drummer, and I figured let's appreciate him. If anyone wants to say anything about him now, please do.
You see those on more than one occasion that he did exactly what he was supposed to do. Yep. They were a club band, okay? And the idea that they would be, playing big concerts with 20,000 people, nah, you kidding me? They had no expectation. I mean, they hoped that would happen, but they were just playing in and around Toronto and not fitting in. And I don't mean not fitting in because they were weird or something. They were just perfectly nice guys, and a lot of people at their high schools knew them. But my point is their music defied categorization. Yeah, some of it was just 3-chord rock and roll, but in some cases they were a little bit too heavy for record hops and dances. But on the other hand, they weren't heavy enough for some people, and they just had a real hard time finding that balance. And Rutsey was able to just bridge the gap, do what needed to be done, no matter what was happening. And it really, really irritates me when I hear people trash him, because it isn't fair to compare him to Neil Peart. It's like comparing apples and oranges. At the time, they weren't looking for a Neil Peart. They were looking for a rock and roll drummer, and that was John Rutsey. May he rest in peace.
Really well said.
If you look at all those early performances like that from that Laura Secord Secondary School, which we've all seen, he was the spokesperson. I mean, he introduced the band members. He was he wasn't their front man, but he was the MC for the night. So somebody had to do that job. Geddy wasn't ready to assume that role at that point, obviously. So he did it. And his drum performance, I mean, really all I can go by is the first album, but it's perfectly solid. It's, it's the same year. If you listen to what Peter Criss did on the first couple of Kiss albums, it's no better or worse. Just bar band, and got a chance to record their songs and recorded them. And, there's absolutely nothing wrong with his drum performance on there.
And fun fact, he was the first lyricist for Rush.
Yep.
Of course, ripped the lyrics right before they went to the studio, and they had to be completely rewritten. But, I'm sure we'll get to that when it comes to.
But there again, that's what he was hired to do. They weren't expecting, grand poetry. This is not like, later Genesis, where you've got these really intricate melodies and these lyrics that take 20 years to understand. No, this is just like, hey, people are dancing at a club and they want something that's got a beat to it. It's like that. So this, for me, long before I knew anything about the band, I'm saying when I first listened to an album like this, I'm not thinking primitive, God, where's Neil? I'm thinking, very typical of a 70s rock and roll band. I've heard a million of them. I wonder if there's anything on it that stands out. So that's what I'm thinking as a music director.
Good stuff. All right. So, of course, we always talk about the album artwork. Hugh Syme didn't do this one. Like we know, he did, though, write a brief paragraph or two in his book, Art of Rush. I'm going to read about this real quick, and then we're going to let the group kind of discuss this. So the trio's self-titled debut featured a comic book-like illustration designed by Paul Weldon, a member of the Toronto pop group Edward Bear. He created the pink curly Q logo of Rush's name. It looked as if it had been thrust to the forefront of the cover by the blast of an explosion. The first album cover was very commercial with its bright explosion, and the logo recalls Rush bassist Geddy Lee. You could tell that the record company was already thinking about a logo. The pink lettering, undoubtedly inspired by the typesetting of Fillmore West music posters, wasn't adopted as a band logo on future album covers. It was supposed to be in red, but the U.S. record company changed it to pink. It was a mistake. I remember it well, says Geddy. So it's just something to...
We all do.
I think...
I wouldn't even call it pink. I would call it sort of a sickly fuchsia.
Like a fuchsia. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think... So the red was the original. It was pink in the U.S. Do you have anything else to add to that, Donna, in terms of that?
No, I thought when I got the record, and this, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is the record that changed my life. It really did. Okay, this is the
all of ours.
Yeah.
This is the SRO Moon Records. It is not dedicated to me because they'd never heard of me. But then again, we had something in common. I'd never heard of them. And when Bob Roper sent me down that record in a manila envelope telling me that the A&M of Canada wasn't going to sign them, but he had heard them play in the clubs and he thought they had potential, I didn't know anything was going to come of it. Like I said, I just thought, this sounds like every other band I've ever heard. Let's see if there's anything here. And the reality is the cover looked to me like, Loving Hands at Home production. Like somebody just got 6 of their friends together, decided to do an album cover. But to me, that was part of the charm. Don't forget, I'm doing this in 1974, okay? In early 74, I get the record in April, okay? It comes out, I think, in March. I get it in April. In 1974, unsigned bands can still get airplay on album rock radio stations and on college stations. I used to get one of these a month, not like Rush, but I'm just saying like a record that like maybe it didn't look like the most professional thing in America. And it was like, so what? You take it out of its jacket, you see if it's got any potential. And interestingly enough, if it did, you might be able to help them get signed. Not that that's what you were working for. That would be conflict of interest. But I'm saying the way it worked in those days was that record companies would watch key radio stations like WMMS in Cleveland, like WMMR in Philadelphia, like KSAN out in San Francisco, and KSHE in St. Louis. And they would watch what we were adding. And if we were adding some unsigned band and playing it and getting good response, which was called reporting to the trades, So we would report to the trade publications like Billboard and Record World and Cashbox and Radio and Records and etc. Stop me if I'm giving you TMI. But record companies would look at that and they'd see, such and such band, import. And it was pretty obvious it had never been signed in the States. And they'd grab a copy up and see if there was anything there. So we all, as music directors, we were thinking, if this album is any good, not just this album, but I'm saying the fact that it's got like an ew kind of cover doesn't matter, because the record company that signs them in the States, they'll bring in the professional staff, they'll bring in the artists, this, that, they'll make a lovely cover. So the fact that the pictures kind of it looked like somebody just put it together with, cut and paste, didn't deter anything about wanting to play it. In fact, what made me want to play it? I liked Bob Roper. Bob Roper and I are still in touch. And I thought, this is a guy who isn't going to waste my time. Okay. This is a guy who knows he's not going to make a dime from this, and neither am I. He's going to send this to me just because he thinks they've got potential. So if he thinks they got potential, forget the cover, forget the name, and just give it a listen. And so I was thinking in that way.
Yeah. Well, so Donna, as you brought up, there are some liner notes that I want to bring up here. And I'm reading from our favorite song by song book. Special thanks to Donna Halper of WMMS in Cleveland for getting the ball rolling. Has been included on every reprint of Rush since its re-release on the Mercury label. It also states, advice to the listener is also included. For best results, play at maximum volume. And I think that's pretty evident in some of these songs that we're going to talk about tonight. Now,
and by the way, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I had no idea that Rush were going to dedicate the American version of their record to me. It was not discussed. I had no heads up. My vague recollection was somebody from the Cleveland Plain Dealer. It may have been Jane Scott. It may have been somebody else. But somebody called and said, hey, got this new Rush album. You're on it. And I'm like, I am? Okay. How am I on it? I thought they meant I was playing on it. I'm like, not me. No. And they were like, no, you're on the cover of back. And then they realized I didn't have a copy. The record promoter, that picture you saw, the record promoter brought copies of the American release. That famous picture you saw with me wearing the long dress and Alex and Getty and Neil looking very just serious. They weren't serious. They were exhausted. Okay. This was like, they never expected any of this. But long story short, I didn't know they were going to put my name on the record. I was eternally grateful. People have said to me many times, yeah, but did you get a finder's fee? No, I didn't get a finder's fee. I got like a 48-year friendship. Okay. Like, how lucky am I? All right. I never asked for any money. I never wanted any money. I was a music director doing my job. And it is one of the great privileges of my life that this turned out the way it did, because all I was trying to do was give a Canadian band who deserved it. I played Canadian music in the past. I was just trying to give a Canadian band that were clearly unsigned in the States a chance to be heard. And I'm glad it worked out. But when they dedicated that record to me, that was my first inkling that, like, wow, these are very special guys. Not because they dedicated it to me, but because they are famously loyal. I'm going to see this time and time again. They are going to take the time to thank all kinds of people that have been there for them since day one. And they never forgot me even years later. And that is so unusual in the music industry.
I think that's so unusual in any industry, really.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's
unfortunately.
Yeah. The last thing I wanted to ask you, Donna, before we talk about for these songs is everyone knows the story behind Working Man. You know, you played it, it connected with Cleveland, all that. But were there any other songs that you played, you know, whether you thought it was good and perhaps you thought it maybe could resonate, or for other reasons that you kind of played on the radio at that time other than Working Man?
Absolutely. So the way music directing was done back then, if you were at top 40, you were just looking for one song. It didn't matter what it was. You were just going to beat that song into the ground. It didn't matter if there were 12 other songs on the record. You weren't going to play them. You were just going to play that one hit single. Okay. Now, at this time, it's also a factor that in Canada, they're trying to get as much Canadian content on the radio. They're trying to, because they have laws up there where you have to play a certain percentage of Canadian music. And I'm saying up there, I'm thinking like I'm in the United States and I've had this explained to me. So I understood that they were going to try to have a bunch of different songs that could have been played on the radio. In our case, we didn't have Canadian content, so I didn't have to worry about it. In my case, I'm looking for something different. I'm looking for long songs. And if I've said this before, I'll say it again. I didn't have to go to the bathroom. The songs that were long songs were jokingly called bathroom songs because usually the way stations were designed, the bathroom was like 6 miles down the hall. Okay. And you're there late at night and suddenly nature calls. And if you got a 2-minute record on, I hope you're a sprinter, because you're going to have to sprint the length of the station, pray that the record doesn't run out, and sprint back. So as a courtesy, those of us that were album rock music directors, we're looking for long songs, but they had to be good songs, okay? They had to be good songs. And by and large, the songs that we chose had nothing to do with anybody having a go. It was more like, but if you do, you can put this on and no one will be the wiser. Working Man, great long song. I wouldn't have picked it if it weren't a great long song. But to answer your question, as we got more requests for Working Man, people started asking, what else is on the album? At the time, all I cared about was finding that killer track that was going to attract attention to the record, whatever the record might be. And then if we got good response, boom, I'd have a couple of others in mind. I already did. I thought Finding My Way and Here Again were going to be just killer tracks if we got a chance to play them. Okay. And so I was already prepared because I just had this feeling that these guys were going to resonate with Cleveland. I really believed that Working Man was going to be like a song everyone wanted to hear, and it was. And pretty soon, people are like, and is there anything else on the album? And I was ready to come right downstairs and say, yeah, Finding My Way. And if you want a power ballad, Here Again. So it was like that. We even played In the Mood. Nobody liked it, but we played it.
Well, I think the four of us are in the mood to talk about some Rush songs here. So
is that what we're here for? Is that what this is about?
Maybe.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So the 4 songs that we picked that we're going to talk about tonight are Finding My Way, Need Some Love, Here Again, and Before and After. And we're just going to go in order of how they appear on. Sometimes we shuffle them, but tonight we're going to go in order how they appear on the record. So the first track on the record, of course, is Finding My Way, and that is one Donna chose. So go ahead.
Yes. 5 minutes and 7 seconds, and I love the song. Okay, I didn't think about the lyrics. To me, this was like a song that just gives you that rock and roll feeling. Okay, I could picture people sitting in their cars just air drumming along to or air guitaring along. Or I didn't expect that people would be like, and I wonder what he's saying in the third verse, because Neil's not with the band yet, all right? And I don't even know from Neil. All I know is this is a great rock and roll song. And I must tell you, to this day, if I hear this song on the radio, or when I heard them do it in concert at the Agora Ballroom in August of '74, I get the chills every time I hear those opening chords, okay? It is no accident that they came back to it and played it in concert a few times because people love it. It's just a great radio song. It's a great rock and roll song. Is it deep? Nope. And it wasn't designed to be. It was designed to be pure rock and roll. It's got energy. It's got power. It's got, I'll be very honest with you, I had no idea what they were singing, but I liked the way it sounded. I mean, yeah, sure, I understood the lyrics. I'm not quite as dumb as I seem, but I'm saying that you didn't necessarily select a rock song based on the lyrics. Yes, there were some poets. Yes, there were some Bob Dylans and people like that back then, Bruce Springsteen later on. But I'm saying that rock and roll back then, it was a lifestyle. It was energy. It was power. Okay. And I thought, wow, I mean, Working Man does have lyrics that resonate. But Finding My Way, those opening chords, that excitement, it just like it builds. And I mean, it's no accident that if you read the reviews, one of the few songs that the early critics liked was Finding My Way. They didn't necessarily like Geddy's vocals, but they really liked that song. They liked Working Man too, but they liked it because of that energy. And I just thought, wow, if they keep doing this, if they keep coming with that kind of energy and that kind of love of rock and roll, these guys are incredibly mature. And we've got to remember, Geddy's 21 years old. They're kids, okay? And for them to come up with that kind of sound, even with a Loving Hands at Home record that didn't have a fancy schmancy producer, or, you know, it wasn't recorded at Abbey Road or someplace famous. And yet, when I heard Finding My Way, I heard it like a music director. I heard it like people are going to want to hear this in concert. They're going to want to hear it in their car. They're going to want to hear it at work. It's just going to make them feel better. And I must tell you, for years, this was one of my go-to songs. When I was having a bad day, I just put it on the turntable. It just made me feel better.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful opening track. It's just a killer rock and roll song, you know?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's
a precursor of what we're going to hear from Rush. They never, you know, yes, they acquired a lyricist. Yes, they acquired more eloquent words, but they never lost that rock and roll energy. They never lost that love for rock and roll. They never lost that power and that enthusiasm. What I heard in that song was enthusiasm. I really did. I heard like, wow, these may be kids. They may be young. They may be amateurs. They love what they're doing. They really sound like they love what I want to get to know them. I want to find out more about them. So I was thinking in that way.
Now, Martin Popoff's Contents Under Pressure says that I know we had talked about, you know, at the beginning of this that you know, Terry Brown remixed the record. I don't know who this quote is from. I'm kind of skimming this real quick, but it does say, "Finding My Way, Need Some Love," and I think Here Again were the songs that we re-recorded for the record. We dropped Not Fade Away, Can't Fight It, which we now know is You Can't Fight It, and there may have been another one. All this stuff we had been playing for 1 or 2 years before. Working Man we had been doing for a while. In the Mood was probably at least 2 years old, if not 3, when we recorded the first record.
And In the Mood was one thing and one thing only. It was their effort to get a hit single that would be played on Canadian Top 40, because back then Canada was like going through its Mellow Jello, Barry Manilow phase. And if you didn't have a hit single, see, we at Album Rock, we weren't constrained in that way at all. I mean, I listened to about 10 seconds of In the Mood and just said, nah, not for us. Just not for us. Okay.
Sure.
And no offense. It's just, it wasn't for us. We weren't a top 40. We played some hits. I mean, we played Aerosmith Dream On and we turned it back into a hit again, but we were looking for rock and roll and they gave it to us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, In the Mood was played as I believe an encore as a lot of their or on a lot of their subsequent tours throughout the 70s and 80s. But Finding My Way, that returned, of course, for R30 as part of the overture at the very beginning of the show.
Didn't they also play
lyrics,
it as an encore during Roll the Bones? When I have vague recollections of when that album was out and they were touring. I could be thinking of something else.
They did it on Hold Your Fire because it's on a show of hands. It's part of, and they did it on several. I think they did it on Great.
Because I know there were at least 3 or 4 times that they brought that one back because people liked the song. I mean, seriously, for all of the advanced, very, very elaborate stuff they did later, there's some very, very simple but wonderful rock and roll on this first record. And we wouldn't have the Rush that we came to know and love without the foundation that first record set. And I gotta tell you, if I didn't hear potential, not like me, Donna, but me, the music director, if I didn't hear potential, it would have just gone on the pile with all the other records that we got in the course of a month that were kind of can't hear it. But I just heard some elements that made me say, yeah, these guys, I don't know where they're going, but these guys love rock and roll.
And it's interesting how you note that it's not Finding My Way's purpose wasn't meant to be this deep thinking, let's see what all the lyrics are, and it's meant to be this hard rocking thing. Because I've had the odd fortune of discovering Rush's discography in weird ways, where I hear a song here and I hear a song there, and through the years I turn up hearing all the songs, and now I know later on where the albums kind of fall in order. But Finding My Way took me a long time to get it, because I'm like, I like 2112 and I like Xanadu and I like all these songs where you think about the lyrics and you understand the story and the themes, but Finding My Way wasn't that way. And it took until I kind of understood this is a hard rock song. This is what they're going for. They're going for energy. And now I'm like, okay, I can settle in now and I get it.
And they want you to know it really is okay to own the foundational elements of your career. You don't have to walk away from it. You don't have to pretend that you sprang full grown at 2112. There wouldn't be a 2112 if it weren't for this first Rush album. This gave them the confidence. Imagine their surprise when they got the phone call that their record was being played like great gangbusters in Cleveland. They were like, how did it get to Cleveland? No, I'm serious. There was a conversation. Ray Daniels and Vic Wilson were like, we didn't send it to Cleveland. We didn't send it to anywhere. No one will even play it in Toronto. They were really surprised. It was one of these fortuitous turns of events. But it proved to me, as it has proved, I'm sure, to you, that you never know where your next favorite band is coming from. And very often, when you listen to those early works by your favorite band, sometimes you need to listen with an ear for, this is them developing. And Isn't it cool to be there while they're doing it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
I feel like I'm talking too much. I apologize.
Oh, no.
Not at all.
No, well, let's let Tim talk about Need Some Love.
Well, this is a 2-minute and 19 second long song. So I just want to say 3 real quick things, if I can, to back up, to further what Donna was talking about. So since I've got a Canadian version of the debut album here, I don't know how well this will show up, but there's a little, I don't know if you can see that circle, that black circle.
Yep.
That says MAPL. So for those of you outside of Canada, MAPL, Maple, right? Maple Leaf, but it stands for music, artist, producer, and lyrics. And to classify as CanCon or Canadian content, you have to have at least 50%. But that was all filled in, of course, because the music and lyrics were written by Alex and Getty, except for In the Mood, which was just Getty. It was produced in Canada, and they are Canadian. So it tipped off all the boxes.
Yep. Says right here, all selections, MAPL.
Yep. And where that half filled in would come in later, if anybody's wondering, well, why would it not be full? There was controversy about the CanCon ruling in the early 90s when Bryan Adams came out with when he started working with Mutt Lange, and he's living in London. So he had Everything I Do It For You, one of the biggest songs of the year, didn't classify as Canadian content, which is like, since when is Bryan Adams not Canadian? So, and you also have situations where you have songs by non-Canadian artists that classify as CanCon. For example, Nazareth covering Joni Mitchell's This Flight Tonight. That's a staple on Canadian radio because the music and lyrics are all Canadian. Speaking of Nazareth, a band that Rush has toured with, I just thought when Donna was talking about Bob Roper, I'm a little surprised that A&M didn't sign Rush, because Nazareth, they're from Scotland, but they were huge in Canada in the 70s. They were bigger in Canada than I think they were in anywhere else in the world. I'm not saying they sounded like Rush, but they played that aggressive kind of hard rock and roll. And they didn't sell millions of albums. They probably in total, but they had gold and platinum albums in Canada through most of the 70s.
But very often what would happen, for those that want a little inside baseball here. So when I was A&R director at Mercury Records, which is artists and repertoire, it's like a talent scout. Okay, so they'd send me to go see a band. Okay, fine, I'd go see a band. That wasn't enough to get them signed. Even if I thought the band was like somewhere between God and Jesus, it didn't matter. What mattered was, did they look like they had a professional act? Did they look like they were confident on stage? Did they have some original material? Did they have more than one song? I mean, Rush in those very early days, in some ways, were not ready for prime time. And I say that loving them dearly. But you're talking about 19 or 20 years old at the time when all of this is being done. The talent scouts from A&M of Canada may have gone to see them on a night when they just weren't that good, or weren't that confident, or weren't that. And if they didn't know you, that was enough to just disqualify you right away. If it was a band that was like produced by Terry Brown, okay, well, everybody knows Terry Brown. So, we got them on a bad night, but we're going to go see them again because Terry Brown. But the band doesn't have that yet. They're just three guys in a bar, or three guys at a high school dance, or three guys at a club. And maybe they saw potential, but like Roper said to me, saw potential, but didn't think they were ready.
So the other thing I wanted was talking about, like, I'm really glad that first album exists as that album cover, because I love this album cover for its simplicity, for its, amateur niche. But man, a record store like NCAP full of these would certainly stand out.
And by the way, for those that are curious, I was asked to autograph that. I don't just like go running around like, oh yeah, you guys.
Yes, it's an honor. I got the CD sign and the 8-track. Brian, looks like he wants to say something.
No, I was just pointing at mine as well. So,
okay.
So Donna's address is on the screen right now. If you want to send it,
send
just
lawyers
kidding.
some money,
But Donna's absolutely right. Like, normally the record company would have taken it, and you've seen this happen before, where all of a sudden you have a very collectible album because the album cover is different once it actually comes out on a major label. But things were happening so quickly, all they did was change the color. But I'm glad it worked out that way because I love this album cover. Now, getting to the song itself needs some love. Thank God he's finally getting to the song, they say. This was this was probably among the first 5 Rush albums I bought when I started buying them. So I got a copy of Permanent Waves, then I got Signals. This is 87, okay? So then I bought Hold Your Fire, which was current at the time. And the very next thing I bought, so early 1988, was the first album on cassette. Now, it's not this cassette that I own now. It was a Canadian Anthem Records one, so it looked different, but didn't matter. At the time I bought it, it was the oldest music that I owned. I'd never bought anything that was as old as I was. So I was born in 74. This album's from 74, but I ended up buying it. I planned on buying them all at some point. That was just one that I grabbed, and I had enough money to buy for it. It was like $7.99 or something. But the point is, pre-internet, I didn't read anything about them in Circus and Hit Parader, which I was buying at the time, which are magazines that covered Rush, but they weren't covering Rush in 1988. You didn't see much about them at all. Thank God for Much Music playing the videos. That's a lot to do with what got me into them. Bottom line is, I bought that first album on cassette, and one of the first things I noticed was that there's a song on it called Need Some Love. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like a Rush song title. Neither does In the Mood. But I didn't know that Neil was not on the first album. I didn't know that yet. I had yet to learn that. It was like I was just buying the albums until I didn't see any more to buy. And that was just one that I listened to. I didn't even know enough to know that wasn't him on the drums. I know some people might say, well, wasn't it obvious? No, it wasn't obvious. I was 13. I'm just learning about this music. I loved the first album. And as far as the lyric, I knew the lyrical content of most of those songs weren't, what Rush became known for, which is more philosophical, even though I didn't have all their albums yet. But it didn't matter. I'm like, well, there must have been part of me at 13 that knew enough to know, but it's their first album. That's okay if it's on their first album. It's their first album. It's some of the very first things probably that they wrote. I don't think it was, and also when you know the story that John Rutsey reportedly had lyrics, tore them up, these really aren't bad lyrics for ones that Geddy had to just scribble out like, right. Studio time is ticking, right? Just throwing money out the door. The longer you take it, you're not recording anything. They're perfectly fine. They sing well. They're well phrased. They rhyme. And Need Some Love is just a quick blast of, in some cases, they probably would have called it heavy metal at the time. That middle section, like it's pretty darn heavy for 1974. I like the fact that it's the second song. Comes in after Finding My Way, because Finding My Way's got that awesome guitar riff that fades in. That works perfectly as an opener. Yep. Need Some Love wouldn't have worked as an opener, but once your ears are attuned to what this band's going to sound like, it's just bang, run in here, and I'm like, it just starts right in. It doesn't need an intro. It's just short, sweet, and to the point. It's probably, if you don't count preludes and things like that, it's probably one of the shortest recorded songs. Maybe BU to B2 or something like that is short, but that's not really a song per se. But 2 minutes and 19 seconds, that's all you need. It gets right to the point. It's a rocking song. And I don't know. I don't think this wasn't one that they did live much after, I don't think, after Neil joined, but I love this first album. I've never had a problem with it, even after I learned about it. Once I learned Neil didn't play on the first album, was a different drummer, I was like, okay, well, that makes a little bit more sense, but I didn't like it any less. So,
but you know what else is interesting about that? People have asked, and they were curious about, like, how did Neil feel about playing Working Man? It's not his song. How did Neil feel about playing Finding My Way? For all of Neil's desire to be like pure and, a philosopher and this and that, the guys really did love the fans. And they really knew that there were certain songs that the fans wanted them to bring those songs back.
Yeah.
Okay. It was no accident that they brought Working Man back. Okay. At first it was sort of a reggae version, but that was kind of their way of saying, we hear you. We know that song has history for a lot of you. We know that song was your introduction to the band. And Neil just had fun with it. It's like, fine. So, like,
and he added his flair.
Rock and roll song. Why?
Right.
He added his flair to all of those. All he had,
of course.
All anyone
he
needs
even
to
did
do
that
is
drum solo at the Agora. That whole.
Yeah, like if you listen to that performance, which has been issued several times, or if you listen to A Farewell to Kings, the way he tackles like What You're Doing, and Like, he makes them his own. They sound like Rush song. They're Rush songs,
which is great because like there's singers that
I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, to me, like it's a lot more noticeable when it's the singer that's changed with songs. For example, Bruce Dickinson of Iron Maiden singing Blaze Bayley stuff, or it's a lot more noticeable when it's like guitar players. We're probably going to notice it when John Five steps in for Mick Mars and Motley Crue's Next Door, like things like that. But when it's an improvement, again, no disrespect to John Rutsey, but let's be honest, it's a vast improvement, considering you're talking about the greatest freaking drummer ever to ever do it. Yeah, there's going to be.
But they were ready for that, Ryan. They
were
ready.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
If it hadn't been for Rutsey, they wouldn't have been ready.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
And they deep down, whether Rutsey's health problems aside, they knew that they needed a lyricist. I mean, Geddy and Alex did some good stuff with lyrics for a 19 and 20-year-old. You can't fault them. They did what needed to be done, but they knew it was time for the next thing.
Well, when they had to write lyrics on the fly for this first album, Geddy was probably like, I'm not doing this every time we go into a studio.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And later on, when they had time to take their time, you get Lessons and you get Cinderella Man, things that are much more
different strings. Yeah,
fleshed
great
out.
songs.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great
I was always happy that they found a place for Finding My Way and for Working Man, because to some degree, as I said, I see that as we're embracing our entire history, because there's a lot of bands that are just kind of like, never did that, and with Rush, they're kind of like the way the Beatles always were. It's like, yeah, some of our early stuff was sort of, but that's where we were at the time. And I don't think anything on this album it's just some of it sounds like 19-year-olds in a club. And others sound like, wow, they're going to be playing this 40 years from now because it's a really great song. Yeah. So we're hearing a little bit of both.
The building blocks of the band they would become are it's here. Yeah. It's right here. I mean, you got 2/3 of the world's greatest trio already. So.
Absolutely.
Well, now's a perfect time for me to say this. Now, this time last calendar year, I did Martin Popoff's show, The Contrarians, on YouTube, and he asked me to do a show on the worst album for a specific band. Of course, he brought me in for Rush.
And you got it handed to you.
And and I had the
not by Martin, but by the comments.
Yes, I had to pick I hate even using the W word with Rush, but I had to pick the worst Rush album for this. Of course, this was the one that I picked, and it's not. I want to set the record straight now because I didn't say this on that when I probably should have. Yeah, I got it handed to me in the comments. Of course, I had tried to reply to as many as I could. That doesn't mean that I dislike this record. So let's set favorite. Yes, let's set that straight.
I personally have never forgiven you. Okay, I just and as you can see, tonight. I stopped talking.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, that doesn't mean that I think it's bad. Exactly what Donna just said. There's 4 or 5 phenomenal tracks on this record. There are 3 or 4 subpar tracks on this record, in my opinion. Donna didn't say that's not a quote. Donna said there's some really good ones and then some ones that are just rock and roll songs, right? But that's how I feel. I feel like there's some really good ones that really stand the test of time, and then some filler. When there's never any filler on Rush albums other than this album, in my opinion.
But I don't think they thought of it as filler. I
don't think they did either. Right.
This is what we know how to do, and so we're going to do this.
Exactly. But I just feel like for Need Some Love, Take a Friend, I feel like they're again. I don't want to come off of. They're not strong, album. Right? They're not strong Rush songs, right?
Yep,
so
absolutely. But you know
that
what?
being said,
I can point out a Beatles album, for heaven's sake, where there's 2 or 3 songs that I'm like,
yeah, for sure. But kind of where I was going with that is the song I'm about to talk about is Here Again, and I think this is
one of my favorites, by the way. Exactly. One of my favorites.
It's probably it's definitely my favorite of the first 4 records. Easily.
Can I just say something I've never said on a show ever?
Yeah.
Ever. Okay. I have a recollection of Getty when he came to town with the band for I think it was the second time. And he said to me, I hope that one day we will be able to play here again in the biggest venue in Toronto, because he said, I just think it's a really good song. And I had to say to him, you know what? It's a great power ballad. It really is, at a time when people loved power ballads. And I said to him, I predict, because by this time we're getting tons of requests for the band and this and that, as I predict, your wish is going to come true. And I'm paraphrasing because we're talking about a conversation that took place in August of 1974. And I got a good memory, but it ain't that good. But I said to him something along the lines of, I think you're onto something. I think that there will come a time when you will be playing it at a big venue. I think he mentioned Massey Hall or something. I mean, just something big. And sure enough, he was able to see that happen. And I still remember that young kid that he was back then, just kind of, no pun intended, finding his way. And just with the hopes and the aspirations for the band for the future. And to know that our station was part of that, and to know that Roper and I, just through wanting to give them a chance, we're putting them on a path where, maybe they will play it at a big venue in Toronto someday.
Right.
And they did.
Yeah, I mean, it's a phenomenal track, and I'll dive into it here. So this, of course, closes side one. It is so much like Working Man, the longest song on the side that it closes. The website Rush Vault describes this song as overwhelmed by life and relationship not going well. Now, I take that as one of the two meanings of this song. There is another meaning that I'll get into momentarily, but it's a 12-bar bluesy piece, slower tempo rather. It shows that Rush, even in the early days, can be creative, because it's not like what else is on the record, really. It's not like your straight ahead, as Tim said, heavy metal Rush song. It's much different, and it just kind of goes to show how diverse Rush was even in the early days. We talk about that all the time.
The word that came to mind when I listened to it was introspective.
Yeah.
It's like they're just contemplating stuff that you wouldn't expect an 18 or a 19 or a 20-year-old to be contemplating.
It's not as in your face as the rest of the stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Now, here's a fun fact that, Tim, you said earlier that Getty and Alex wrote all the lyrics. Now, in Contents Under Pressure, Martin Popoff's Contents Under Pressure, there's a quote by Alex that says, another interesting hurdle to overcome if Rush was to have finished the first album. The funny thing is, John was a lyricist in the band at the time, and he wouldn't submit the lyrics for any of these songs, so Getty had to quickly put some lyrics together for it. I wrote the lyrics on Here Again, but everything else was just sort of thrown together. According to Alex wrote the lyrics for this song, which
that kind of makes
sense
know. Because if you listen to that song, or if you read the lyrics to that song, and then you read the lyrics to Lessons, they're not dissimilar.
Sure.
Kind of gives you a glimpse into the mind of young Alex.
They both get writing credit on it. If you look on the record, they both
do.
Yeah.
So it may very well have been a collaboration.
It may very well have been Alex wrote them, presented them to Getty, and Getty said, here, let me make a couple changes. Yeah, right. And
I get the impression even back then, and you saw Beyond the Lighted Stage, they were friends, okay? Yeah, and so they weren't going to stand on ceremonies. They weren't going to go, well, Eric did this, yeah, but Ryan did that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even like that. It was like, yeah, what you said. Getty has an idea, or Alex has an idea. They bring it to each other. They're playing around with it. They don't have a lot of time to be in the studio because they don't have a lot of money. And it's like, hey, let's tweak this. Let's tweak that. It was all the same because they were friends and they just wanted their music to be heard. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's,
you've got the opening slow tempo Alex
Yeah, that thing
chords
is
and
incredible. That
and-
open, it just
Yeah.
yeah.
When Snakes and Arrows came out, and when I heard When the Wind Blows, I was thinking, oh, Rush plays the blues. I'm like, have they ever done anything like this before? And the first thing I thought of was, well, Here Again. That's essentially like a heavy blues.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, I think there's two meanings of the lyrics behind this song. One, I think it does have to do with relationships, but I also think it has to do with moving forward and progressing and what they did as a band. I think that's the literal meaning of it. I think the metaphorical meaning of it is relationships. I said I played this song so many times before. The melody keeps repeating. Growing new ideas, the progressing forward, flowing chords and notes like a mountain river bleeding. I've always loved that line. I think it kind of seems like a relationship, kind of going through the motions. Here we are again. Having arguments with your partner or whatever, and using the mountain river bleeding kind of like a metaphor for that. Here we are again. It's happening over and over. It continues to happen.
I have I hate to interrupt, I'm a
Yeah, go
horrible
ahead.
person, but I have just a slightly different take on it.
Yes, please.
Once I got to know the band, I kind of took it to mean like their relationship with the music industry, because here was the industry forcing them to do this, in the, hey baby, I like you, this and that.
Okay.
Stuff they didn't even want to do. And the whole bleeding thing, like you're bleeding us dry. You're trying to take away our creativity. You're making us do the same thing over and over, play in the clubs, not being able to be creative. We want to do songs like Working Man and Here Again and Finding My Way. You're telling us we have to do songs like In the Mood. Just that creative tension is playing out even then, and it's hurting them. It's frustrating them. They're not.
That's a very interesting.
They're not being taken
right from the
serious.
beginning.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah,
and it does. And
they're like, we want to do it our way.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that because, like, I thought some of that. You get some of that in Fly By Night. You get some of that in Aggressive Steel and 2112. I didn't even think of that. And on this record, like that,
don't you see what I'm feeling? Yeah, he could be talking to his girlfriend, but he could be talking to all those record companies he brought the records to, and it's like, can't you see we've got potential? Let us do it.
Yeah.
But
or like playing the same club over and over again. I've been in one place too long.
Yes, I've played this song so many times before. Just God, if I play In the Mood one more time.
Yeah. I mean, well, you've kind of just changed my entire opinion of the song, and all of my
I'm
notes
a horrible person. I don't know why you have me on your show.
Now my notes.
And we didn't think there'd be any lyrical debate on this first album. So there you go.
Yeah, right. There you go.
And meanwhile, people are throwing things at the screen. It's like, yes, but I think it means.
Yeah, well, I mean, even this record, I mean, there are lyrics on this record that can be, interpreted different ways, and that just goes to show. I mean, I was thinking, you got, yes, I've seen your face before. Wow, I've seen it everywhere, showing up to me without a scent revealing. Like, I always thought this was trying to read your partner or your spouse or whatever without them saying anything, without a scent revealing. Seeing them every day and on occasion you still can't read them. I mean, that's kind of how I interpreted that. But no, I mean, I think.
But he says the thoughts I've had just reflect what I'm learning. I'm learning about the industry. I'm learning about life. I'm learning about love. I'm still young, and I'm finding that there's all of these obstacles being put in my path. And imagine the frustration the guys must have felt. And then imagine their surprise when they found out that people in Cleveland loved them. That's another very early memory I have of Alex and Geddy and John Rutsey. They're very shy. They've come to Cleveland for the first time, and people are calling out their name. People knew who they were. And Geddy was just
shocked. Yeah.
How?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess this song can be taken many different ways. But I think
Forgive
we
me
can
for
all
taking
agree.
you off on a tangent. I
No,
apologize.
it's totally fine. I mean, now my entire interpretation of this song has been changed, and I think that's
you could
wonderful.
almost say What You're Doing is about the same thing.
Yeah, sure.
But
you can't say that
think,
about In the Mood.
Yeah.
I think we can all agree though that this song has an amazing bluesy guitar solo.
Oh yeah.
Another solo that starts slow,
Incredible.
it builds,
still love it.
slow again. It's just a very impressive solo. It shows really that Alex doesn't always need to go crazy in a solo to be impressive. You get the chorus again at the end where Alex is just soloing underneath it to kind of just end the song. And yeah, I mean that's really what I've got to say about this song. I just think I think it's a wonderful song at the beginning of Rush's career that definitely if it's one you've omitted over the years, definitely go back and listen to it because it's over 7 minutes. It's a longer piece, and it's fantastic. So, all right, Eric, talk about before and after.
Sure, I'll bring it home. I just have a couple quick notes because what do I know as a 22-year-old kid, but we'll give it a shot. So we've talked a few times about, this album being the foundations and the building blocks, and you can see what they started here and what they would build upon. I think before and after kind of gives potentially the biggest insight into that sort of idea where this is really the foundation. This is the building block that they're going to build upon. It starts off with that real slow beginning. You got maybe 3 tracks of guitar where Alex is doing the high harmonics and the acoustic and the phased guitar, really taking their time, and the drums and the bass join in. And I don't know, I didn't take the time to time it, but maybe it's a minute or 2 minutes of just really taking their time cruising through this bluesy intro before they slow down and you get the snare roll and then they're full force back into that hard rock that you've had the 6 songs prior. And that kind of leads into songs like The Trees or A Farewell to Kings, where they would do this down the road. They take their time in the beginning and then hit you with the hard rock. So they're sort of building on that same idea where we're going to have tons of layers, tons of moodiness, tons of feeling in the beginning, and then just hit you in the face with some hard rock at the end. But then, of course, you get that hard rock, and the lyrics, maybe they mean something, maybe they don't. A little bit about relationships, like it seems a lot of the album is about. Maybe they're having some trouble with, their friends or their girlfriends or their wives at this time, who knows. But I think at the heart of it is, again, it's hard rock. It's meant to be energetic, and it's meant to be, maybe you could dance at a high school dance to it. Maybe you could dance at a club. Another thing I think about this song is it's very Zeppelin-esque or The Who-esque, especially in the instrumental breaks, where you get all unison hitting the riff, and then you have a drum break, or then you have Alex playing a quick little mini solo, and then they can get back to that main riff. And again, that's something they'd hit on down the road. I think of something like Between Sun and Moon on Counterparts, and that's almost 20 years later, where they're doing the big riff in that sort of instrumental bridge and doing a drum break or a guitar solo. So again, building upon what they did in this 1974 album throughout the rest of their career. And the last little note I have about this is the song's called Before and After, right? And maybe it means nothing, the title, but to me, the lyrics are about there's a relationship that's maybe struggling, maybe before it was peaceful and quiet and easygoing, and after they're going through some troubles, which I think a lot of the lyrics talk about. The title reflects that, but they also reflect it in the music, where for the first minute or two, they're going very slow and peaceful and easy. And after, they're hitting you pretty heavy in the face with that hard rock. So I think it's one of the first instances where they've really used the music to tell the story along with the lyrics. And that's all I have to say about that.
And what a great riff. Da, 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 da.
I think it's one of the best they wrote.
It's killer. Yeah.
It's a song that's often forgotten about, especially on this record. But in terms of the Rush catalog as a whole, it is forgotten about. And I mean, I'll be honest, it's one that I hadn't listened to for years and years and years until just this past, this calendar year, and just realized how good of a track it really is. It really is. It really tells a story with the music, like Eric said, and it's it showcases what's to come. I mean, we talk about the foundation of Rush, and that's this record. It talks about both lyrically and musically. This record has all of that. And
especially when it comes at the back end of side 2, right before some song called Working Man, if you've ever heard of it. Who's going to listen to before and after? We're going to skip over that and go to Working Man. So
right, yeah.
And if we've done anything on this series, and we're not quite done yet, but if we've done anything on this series, we hope we've given you an opportunity to revisit some songs that maybe you hadn't thought about in a while. Okay? I mean, there are so many songs on every Rush album that are kind of like, oh yeah, everybody knows that song. But that doesn't mean the other songs don't have something to say or don't have some value to them. And I really invite people to revisit songs like Here Again, to revisit songs like Finding My Way, not to compare them to, oh my God, Neil, but to compare them to where were they? Where are they?
Mm-hmm.
Where are they going? And where are they on the journey? And where can we as fans be there with them? Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
That makes complete sense. Yeah. 100%.
So that's all I got.
Yeah, it's all I got too.
People should leave comments. We really want to know what you think about this one.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of those Rush records that often gets, hated on. It's one of those Rush records.
Not by me. It changed my life.
That's true.
I'm serious. If Bob Roper had not sent me this record, okay, I would not be here today talking to thousands and thousands of people who are all united by the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
They love Rush. I feel like I was given a great gift. And I don't even think Roper himself realized how much this would change everybody's life. But I mean, to have been there at the beginning, to have had a role, to have been able to give them the chance that they deserved. We opened the door, they walked through it. They did the work, okay? We were just kind of cheering them on. And it is just such a privilege to have been a music director, to have been at a station that gave me the opportunity to do that. And it's also a privilege to be with you guys, to talk about this band. And I thank you for having me on with you.
Yeah, I mean, I was just about to say that as just a few housekeeping notes here to wrap this. I mean, when we'll say, March or April of 2021, when I reached out to both Donna and Tim, you guys, and I said, hey, I want to do this series, and you both so graciously accepted. And this is why I chose this record to be the finale, the finale here as well, because I just thought it would put a nice bow on this entire series. I went through 2 jobs. I went through 3 pairs of glasses. I went through 19 different Rush shirts. So many things over the past year and a half doing these with you, with both of you, and Eric, this is your second, and everyone else who has been a part of this series.
We've had some fantastic,
phenomenal discussions. Yeah. And I think now is the time just to very simply say thank you to all of you, and everyone who has participated and everyone who has watched. At the beginning of this, I said, this is the last studio album we will be deep diving into. There will be some surprises coming up. I will leave it at that. Some that we have planned, some that I'm sure we will, think of in the future. Let's just say the deep dive series is not going away completely. We are done with studio albums. There will be some more surprises. It will no longer be a month-to-month thing. I just want to set that record straight. But, we will do our best to keep this series alive in some aspect. Because I know there were some comments, on the last video, like, oh no, the series is coming to an end. And, it's not coming to an end just yet. And we're going to do our best to keep it alive. So on behalf of everyone at Rush fans, and all you and all of our followers and viewers of these videos, thank you very much. And we'll see you next time on Rush Deep Dive. Take care, everybody.